97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles insider John McMullen. He was at the link yesterday. And, John, I know you were here last week and said, look, they're not losing at home. This team's a mess to the Minnesota Vikings. What does that say for the Eagles, who did lose at home against a team that, quite frankly, I wasn't like, wow, this Vikings team is really good. What'd you take from it?
Yeah, it's a bad loss. There's no way around it. I think a lot of the stuff we talked about last week came to fruition. The Eagles got a ton of pressure on Kirk Cousins, as expected. I thought Doug Peterson outcoached Mike Zimmer, as expected. I thought there were a lot of good things, but you look up at the scoreboard in the end, and they lose a football game. And normally when I hear teams talk about self-inflicted wounds and shooting themselves in the foot, I kind of brush it off. But in this case, it's true. There were so many little mistakes, starting with simple things like the pre-snap penalties on offense. You clean that up and you win that football game pretty easily. But that's where the Eagles are. They are just making a lot of mistakes. It's not one here and one there. It's significant numbers of mistakes on both sides of the football.
More alarming. Problems on. I thought the defense played well yesterday. I don't think they were a big part of the problem. But would you say offense, defense, coaching, when you look at that game yesterday, moving forward, big picture, what is the biggest issue right now?
Well, the offense has got to clean it up. I don't think there's any doubt. Look, and we talked about it a lot. And I thought people criticized the defense, and that's fine. And I told them coming into the game, Minnesota was going to make plays because Cousins can throw it, and he's got two really good receivers. If you look around this league and how much offense gets generated by the good quarterbacks and the good receivers, Eagles are below the league average. They're playing well enough on defense to win these games. Offensively, not so much. So I think if you're going to place blame on one area, it's got to be the offense, and it's the mistakes. And it's the lack of attention to detail and the regression on the offensive line. It's part of it. I think it's all come together. It's sort of a confluence of factors.
Doug Peterson was asked today if he thought that they should run the ball. Does he agree with Jay Ajayi? He says, yeah, I do agree. So is this kind of his come-to-Jesus moment? He had one last year. They didn't run the ball. Blunt came out. He said, I don't know why. And they went down the next week, and Blunt ran for about 150 yards in that game against the Chargers. So was this his come-to-Jesus moment when we see Thursday night a lot of Jay Ajayi and friends?
No, I don't think so. I think Doug's sort of like me with the run-pass ratio. I think he gets tired of it. He taps out at times. I say it all the time. He says it all the time. Personality of the game. It relates to how things shake out in the modern NFL. The fact they were down 20-3. You look at it from the other standpoint. Look at Minnesota and the way they played the second half. They should have won that game easily. And they're trying to run out the clock with 10 minutes left in the third quarter, and they're lucky to escape. You just can't win that way anymore in the NFL. So if you look at run-pass ratio week to week, if you're winning by 2 touchdowns late, you're going to get a lot of runs. If you're losing by 2 touchdowns late, you're going to get a lot of passes. I don't think it has a huge impact. I really don't.
I tend to agree with you in today's game. Like, you're throwing the ball, everybody's throwing the ball, the plays. They're not – and I say they're not throwing the ball well. They throw for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns Wentz yesterday. But it seems that they don't have the dynamic player in their offense to go down that road. You agree with that?
Yeah, I do. They don't have a big-time playmaker, and you saw 2 big-time playmakers yesterday on the other side. That's one thing I think you can point at. I asked Doug today, and by no means do I think don't get excited, Mike. I don't think
I heard you.
Gibson
I heard you ask the
Gibson.
I heard you ask the Gibson question last night, and I got excited, and I heard it again today, a variation today.
Well,
and I
the
said,
reason
all right.
why is because they're missing that from their offense.
And look, that kid made a play that you talk about that Aguilar can't make. He adjusted his body and went up and got that ball.
But it goes even farther than that, because I don't care if he's just running go routes consistently. Hey, coaches in this league, and I used to criticize Norv Turner for this with Cordero Patterson. Look, Cordero Patterson can't run a route. He just can't. He's not good at it, but he's a heck of a playmaker. So either you take advantage of him or you don't. In the case of Shelton Gibson, everybody wants Adam Thielen. Everybody wants the well-rounded receiver who can run routes, who can beat you deep, can beat you short, can beat you on third down. Everybody wants that guy. There's not a lot of those guys. The Eagles lack playmakers. They lack speed on offense. And even if you have this guy running go routes, put him on the field instead of Jordan Matthews. That opens up things underneath for Jeffrey, Aguilar, Zach Ertz, everybody. It gets easier. I don't know why this team is not pulling the trigger. I think that's going to change. He only played 9 snaps, but he made the big play, as you mentioned. I think that's going to slowly increase. And they need a guy who can run on that offense on the outside.
Yeah, and I bring it up a lot. I said it last week. I think they're missing a guy like Smith. I know they brought Wallace in. Smith didn't have great numbers, but he was just there. I mean, he was out there. You had to at least say, this guy's on the field. Wallace was supposed to be that guy. I get it. And they don't have Wallace, so they got to come up with another way to do it. And one play, I don't see them a lot. You know, I see Diggs yesterday. Diggs has 10 for 91. Not great. But it's that little curl, that little underneath where they seem like they're getting a lot of space, these other receivers. They're catching the ball underneath and then getting up the field. In a league that can't tackle, I feel like that element has been taken from the Eagles. I mean, Aguilar, 4 for 45. He seems like he's a non-factor in the offense right now.
Yeah, he's not playing well, and that's a disappointment because you thought he was over the hump. It wasn't nearly as bad as it was in Tennessee. But he hasn't been the same player. I think part of it is the moving around. I don't think he should be outside at all. I think you should leave him in the slot and leave him alone. That's where he excels. That's where he gets his confidence from. But I agree with you. He's not playing well. He's another guy. And I wrote about this on 973ESPN.com. Well, everybody's, jumping off buildings today. I think, I talked about a regression to the mean. We talked a lot about career years and how many guys had career years last year. And it probably wasn't going to happen again. And I specifically Lane Johnson for the second straight game gives up the strip sack. This one goes back the other way for a touchdown. He was lights out last year, and now he's not playing well. You just mentioned another one, and Nelson Aguilar. It was going to be tough for this team to duplicate so many players having career years back-to-back. So I think the path forward by no means is over because this is a terrible division. If Washington loses tonight, the NFC East will be 0 for Week 5. The Eagles are smack dab in this division, but now you got to look at it realistically. Yeah. You almost expect to win the division, but you're going to have to go on the road in the playoffs. Yep. Certainly the Los Angeles Rams are not coming back to the pack because just like the Eagles in the NFC East, they play in a bad division. They're already 5-0. Yeah. So they're not coming back.
Well, and I looked at the numbers the other day. You talk about division. The Eagles' offense, Washington, New York, and Philly are 23, 24, and 25, and then Dallas is 30th. You've got 4 of the worst offenses in the entire league, all in the Northeast. Well, I guess Dallas isn't really in the Northeast, but in the NFC East. So at some point, you got to start asking the question, is this just going to be one of these years where 9-7 wins it, or can the Eagles be that team that I guess, are there answers on this offense, or is this what it is?
No, I think there's answers. I think it's going to get better, and partially because, Carson Wentz we haven't talked about. I'm not going to get into some of these loons on Twitter, Mike, that we both got that are talking about going back to Nick Foles, which is absurd. But,
got through for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns 2 weeks in. Last week he had 350 and 2 touchdowns. This week he only had 311.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, as you know, I'm not a big stat guy. Football is not a statistics-based game. And I constantly talk, people look at, I said it with Derek Barnett last week, people who think Derek Barnett is better than Brandon Graham just don't know what they're looking at. But because he's got more sacks, that's what people lean on. If you look at that last drive, that last touchdown drive, Minnesota was just giving them free yardage to try to run out the clock, which they weren't able to do.
Right, so that's why Ertz ends up with. That's why Ertz ends up with the monster game too. He has 10 for 110. Exactly. 30 of those came on the last 3 catches.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get hyped up because those were sort of garbage time points in a blowout NBA game, and it wasn't a blowout. But that's Minnesota's issue. From the Eagles' perspective, Carson Wentz, he's part of this too, because he's not the same guy as far as getting into a rhythm, getting the football out of his hand. And we talk about how many hits he's taken. Well, part of the reasons he's taken so many damn hits is because
holds on
he's not
to the
getting
ball.
The football out. And he's a big part of it as far as the pass protection. And the ball's not coming out on time. And that, to be honest, that was a Nick Foles issue as well. But the Eagles kind of knew.
Well, Foles might have got sacked 8 times yesterday.
Yeah. Well, no. You know why he wouldn't have? Because he would have got the football out, and it would have been shorter. Like Minnesota's having you talked about Diggs' number. Well, part of the reasons why Diggs is catching 10 for 90 is because they can't pass block. So it's all quick throws. It's quick rhythm throws.
Yeah.
And then the receiver is got to sort of do some things at yards after the catch. Now, from a defensive standpoint, the biggest disappointment was, from my perspective, was they blitzed Cousins all out 3 times, 3 different times, and it was the 68-yard play to Thielen, and then it was a 17 and a 13-yard gain from Minnesota. Part of that was Cousins was having a big day, but that's disappointing when you blitz. And we always talk about fans always want to blitz. Well, the Eagles went 0 blitz 3 times, and they got burned 3 times.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's the one thing too is, look, we haven't touched on the Bennett play, and I know you can't change it, but that was a big play. That's a big play in the game because they end up going from 3rd and long, where most likely they end up with 3 to scoring a touchdown. So it's a 4-point swing.
The way Dan Bailey was kicking, not even necessarily 3.
Exactly. I'm saying
so inconsistent.
Possibly 3. That's a 4-point swing. You lose the game by 2.
Yeah, but as I said, I've been talking about this summer. I said, get used to it. It's going to cost you a game. Now, if you want to say, I agree with you, that's not a penalty, but that's the NFL today. It has happened to every team. Eagles, to be honest, have been sort of lucky in that standpoint. You look at a team like Green Bay, and Clay Matthews hits three weeks in a row. It's happening to everybody. And I also pointed out on that last drive, Sendejo, because of his reputation, talked about him all week. The Eagles got a free 15. That's not a penalty. So, you can look at it both ways, but I give the Eagles credit because, and Doug said it again today, it's the rule. There's nothing he can do about it. So why complain about it?
Yeah, no, and look, I get it. That's the league, but some of them are really egregious. I get it. The ones where, all right, you tack on them and your body weight's on them.
They don't look at it. That's the problem. They don't look at the play. All they saw was Michael Bennett around Kirk Cousins' knees. That's all they saw. And as soon as they saw that, the flag comes out. They're not looking at how he makes the hit. They're not looking at it was almost like that viral video where that fan made putting a pillow down. That's how
I mean, John, they essentially want. He got blocked to the ground and just happened to be right there at his feet. He's like, "Look what I found. Hey, I'm going to take you down." It was almost like they wanted him to get up.
Yeah, it was the most gentle. It's a ridiculous rule, and I've been talking about it since the beginning of the season, since the preseason. But I mean, it's not changing. And does it affect the integrity of the game? Yes. These have big implications. I explained on Countdown to Kickoff. Pete Carroll has that study. If you get an explosive play running the football or passing the football, you score 75% of the time. Explosive plays, 16 yards pass, 12-yard run. From the Seahawks' perspective, that's what they call an explosive play. Well, what's a 15-yard penalty? It's the same thing. You're going to score 75% of the time. But I guess what, Mike? This has been going on for years before this rule with the ticky-tack pass interference calls. I mean, that's just what this league is. Mm-hmm. It's over-legislated. I think it's, from an entertainment standpoint, we've talked about this a lot. I think it's terrible for the game.
Ratings are up, by the way.
Yeah, people keep watching.
Yep. The ratings are up.
Yeah, the Eagles, the theme of the Eagles yesterday was look in the mirror. Look in the mirror at themselves because they're making so many mistakes. If fans are going to get this upset, look in the mirror. You're watching this stuff. I mean, it's going to happen. And I warned. I wrote that Serenity Prayer piece. It was going to happen. Yeah. And guess what? It's going to happen again. Going to happen again.
The piece is at 973ESPN.com. John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. There's a lot to dive into here. Obviously, you asked about the sense of urgency. They're not. I mean, the first half of that game, you would have thought they were the 0-16 Cleveland Browns watching that team.
Yeah, that's been the strangest thing. I think from an offensive perspective of it all is because they were so good at the beginning of games last season, and they scripted stuff so well, and it just hasn't been that way this year. And yet, before you brought me on, you talked about the texter. I've been saying that for a long time. There's a big difference between Frank Reich and John DeFilippo.
I thought the point you made on Mosher, McMullen, and Krause, I tried to echo it, that Groh was essentially the third-string play caller. I mean, you go from Reich to DeFilippo, who's now gone. Now you're going to the third guy, your third option. I thought that was a great point.
Yeah, and it's actually fourth because Jeff Stoutland was ahead of him last year as far as game planning because Jeff's got a big part of the run game as far as the game plan. So if you're going back to last year's staff, he was actually behind all three of them. As far as game planning, so that's a pretty big leap, and that's two pretty good coaches.
Yep,
you lost.
I thought DeFilippo had a good game plan yesterday, and they ran the ball. Look, that was a team that came in that said we can't run. They can't run the ball. They ran it 20. Look, it's not the yards they got; it's the fact that they did it. And yeah, they were 23 for 77, which is not very good, but it was just one run here and one run there, and it just made you have to honor it. And late in the game, they got the 9-yard run. They did it. That was the thing. They did it where I thought Philly, they only had 12 runs yesterday, John, 12. But I don't want to get into the splits as much as Peterson doesn't go for a 58-yard field goal. Elliott, he can't hit a 30, but he'll hit a 60. So what's the message there? Because, I mean, on one side you could say, all right, he trusts his defense. He'll punt it to try to flip the field and see if he can get a turnover down that end of the field because he likes the way his defenses are playing. Or does he not trust the defense if Elliott misses to play with the short field?
I think it's more of the former. I think they were playing well, and I think he realized how that game was going, and that's what I criticized the Vikings for. They went in the shell way too early. So I think he knew they were in a shell, and you just kick it. You hope to pin them deep and get the ball back. So I don't necessarily disagree with their strategy. I don't think it was anything against giving them a short field. I just thought he thought it was the best strategy at that particular time. And from the way the game was going, that's the way I would have played it as well. But anytime Doug doesn't go the so-called aggressive route, people start to question it. I thought going for two, it shouldn't have worked, but that was brilliant.
The math says to go for two.
Yeah, I thought they were going to win the game. And I joked, Mike Zimmer, I joked at the time, Mike Zimmer's going to lose this game 21-20. He's going to have no idea what happened. And it didn't work out that way. But I thought that was brilliant because, as you mentioned, the math says go for it at that particular time. Now, that said, also, play shouldn't have worked. It was blown up, and Sendejo missed the tackle. But nobody's going to second guess when something works.
A lot to dive into this week. It's a short week. Doug looked tired, worn to you. I mean, last night Joyner on the postgame said he looks exhausted, he looks tired, he looks defeated.
Well, he looked defeated. I don't think it was exhaustion. I think it was frustration. He was frustrated at that postgame press conference.
You feel like, let me answer this, like we talk about no DiFilippo, no Reich. Do you feel like he's taken on too much, like he doesn't trust Groh enough to, like last year he might say to Reich, here, do this, 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 and this. And with this guy, he's only saying do this and this because I don't trust you with this, this, and this.
Well, it's hard to tell because he won't tell us, and on the record or off the record, to be honest. He says Mike is doing the exact same things Frank was, so I have to take him at his word there. But he might be doing the exact same things. I just don't think he's doing them as well. So that's part of it. But I don't think it's the coaching. I think he's frustrated at the mistakes. I really do.
Fair.
Not lining up correctly. I mean, that's just
it's awful.
That's attention to detail. That's ridiculous stuff. That has nothing to do with Mike Groh. That's just a mental mistake, and that's the kind of stuff that obviously puts you behind the chains. And I mean, you think about it, when Rock Thomas fumbles that lateral, Eagles get the ball at the 30-yard line. They should go in and win that football game right there. And it was just penalty and penalty and backed up to the point where they do have to punt the football. It really is self-inflicted at times. And if they clean that stuff up in that game, they win it, and they still have a chance to turn it around. I'm not pushing the panic button yet. I will say this. If they don't win Thursday up the turnpike, then it's time to push the panic button.
Okay. Yeah, I know Wood said after the game, frustrated, yes, concerned, no. I think that's a good way to put it. I would say frustrated. If the first half, my question, I guess, is first half, I would be concerned. Second half, was there some sort of, I don't know, silver lining that you could take that maybe they turned the corner in that second half?
No, I think it was a bad game all around. I'll tell you why. Obviously, it looked much worse in the first half, but I think part of the reason they looked better in the second half was because of some of the things I mentioned. Minnesota was just awful coaching job by Mike Zimmer. So they were given yards. They were literally giving them yards late in the game, trying to run out the clock. As I said, they went in the shell. Mike Zimmer said in his press conference today he was trying to run out the clock in the third quarter. I mean, you don't do that in today's NFL, and they managed to escape by the skin of their teeth. I thought it was an awful performance all around. Not defensively. I thought there were plenty of good things to pick out defensively. I know people don't agree with that. But again, I always talk about the myopic nature of a fan base. Like let's be honest, most Philadelphia fans don't know how good Adam Thielen is, don't know how good Stephon Diggs is. And I said all throughout the week with you and on Countdown to Kickoff and on Mosier, McMullen, and Krause, I said that those receivers are going to get theirs. They get it against everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to kill the Eagles for struggling against those two guys. Bottom line is they did enough to win. And the offense, on the other hand, it didn't hold its water. And because it looks better, because of that last drive, statistically, that means nothing to me because those are free yards.
Plenty more this week. Eagles-Giants Thursday night, and they'll right back at it. So short week. We'll get into it all right here with Johnny Mack here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, Mike.